Christian and I talked about the Victory Wrexham game in the last episode, and we kind of had this holistic discussion about, what's the purpose of these games in the first place? How do we convert some of these fans across? And we saw, 37,000, I think, in Melbourne. We saw an even bigger crowd last time out in Sydney. Was it over 40,000 people, I think, turned up for it? And that conversation has not gone away. In fact, it's gotten louder because in the post-game press conferences and interviews and things like that, we saw some comments being made, particularly from Alex Grant, who came out and basically was rallying behind the A-League and saying, if you can come out and watch this, we've just beaten Wrexham, we're showing the quality that the A-League has. Come on out and support us. And I suppose it's just part and parcel of Australian football, right, Lockie, that there are always going to be people that are interested in football but not in the Australian product. But it's the fact that we're now starting to see players and media figures and coaches and the like coming out and publicly addressing it. It kind of feels like hopefully there's going to be a turning of the tides, and with more results like this as well, right, where people come and watch because they think that Wrexham are this great big club, and all the PR and the marketing that they've had in recent years has helped that image. They've just been beaten by the local guys, so it's like, is that gonna bear any influence in changing these people's minds? Or
look, this is, as you guys were talking about the other day, it's a conversation that always comes up. I tend to view it a little bit differently. Like, I don't quite understand the idea, like lots of people on social media don't, like, it's not worth being upset about the fact that these games have big crowds. This is not like we should be surprised that a really popular team coming to Australia is attracting people.
Yeah.
It's not the cause and effect. It's the other way around, right? We need to try and build our league to the point where it also gets that support. We can't be angry at people because they've done a better job at marketing themselves from the other side of the world. Yeah. That's a bit silly. We should be focusing on us. We shouldn't just blame random people for being more interested in them because they tell a really interesting story. And a really, compassionate and motivating one as well. If you've watched the documentary, some of these episodes are based around the people of the town, and not necessarily the football. And you get to learn some of the really inspiring stories. And storytelling is not something we do amazingly in Australian football. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that as well. We look back at what was the YouTube series they did?
A-League's All Access or something, I think.
All Access, that's correct. That was one version. It was a little bit different. It got maybe 20 to 30,000 views per episode on YouTube. Could have been, in my opinion, could have been packaged a little bit better, but obviously people just kind of weren't watching it to the scale of what you wanted to get mainstream Australia interested. So, look, we just have to focus on us and do what we can better. The A-League is growing year on year since COVID. I think if we can do that for 20 years in a row, then people aren't going to be able to ignore us. So steadily building and building. In terms of the game itself, big old asterisks to my last conversation. Club friendlies, very different to international friendlies. I was bored out of my brain watching this, I won't lie. It was kind of cool when the Sydney kids came on and gave them a real run, and Joe Lacey, I believe his name, scoring the winner. That was pretty cool. Turns out his family is Welsh, and they'd all buggered off to Wales on holiday, and it was only his sister that stayed behind to watch him. And apparently maybe an aunts or something is like a paramedic at Wrexham games on match day something.
That's great.
Pretty cool link there. It's cool to see that Sydney have the stock in the youth academy as well, but I think people who watch the A-League day in, day out, like me, you're not going to be too interested in these games, and that's okay. But the fact that, Wrexham are dragging 40,000 people who probably don't watch the A-League to watch Sydney FC, you're going to get some people coming through the door of Sydney FC this year. So it is what it is. We shouldn't be upset about people doing other things successfully. Let's just keep trying to work on it ourselves.
Well, I want to talk a bit about the football as well, because that's kind of been overlooked in all of this, and the discussion on social media has been around all what we've just spoken about in terms of how do we get these crowds in and things like that. But kind of a stark comparison can be drawn now between Sydney FC and Melbourne Victory, right? And okay, like let's take this with a grain of salt or a heap of salt, but like Sydney went out and beat Wrexham. Victory lost to Wrexham. Sydney crushed some MPL2 opposition recently. Melbourne Victory did not. It kind of feels like these two teams that had very different seasons last season. Of course, Victory made it all the way to the final. They were, a very consistently high-performing team last season, and Sydney had their ups and downs and couldn't find their rhythm, but they've got these big impact players, like Douglas Costas in the side, who you kind of presume are going to have an impact consistently at some point while they're at Sydney. Kind of almost feels like that it's been flipped now, where Sydney have come in and they're playing good football in the pre-season and they look fired up again, but Victory have kind of almost fallen away slightly on the back end of last season. We still don't know what the situation is 100% with Bruno Fornaroli, so we saw Nikos Virgos get the start against Wrexham, so there's question marks there about recruitment, and obviously Victory have lost a lot of players in this off-season. Sydney have lost a few too, but they look to be kind of strengthening that core squad that they've got. Like, it kind of feels like there's these two contrasting stories now going on with these two of the biggest clubs in the A-League, and you just have to look at the results that they both had against the same team in pre-season to kind of draw those comparisons a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. The pre-season games, you can't really take them too seriously. However, I do think there are some conclusions you can draw, even just from the transfer window. My very early opinion of Melbourne Victory is that they are not a top four side in the next A-League campaign. I think they've lost too many strong players. Mitch Langerak's retirement, that was a surprise. Was it his level? I don't think so. Is it just because, Jack Duncan got his year extension and maybe those wages were more, bearable for Victory rather than Langerak, and they just had a word, do you want a job in the coaching department or something? I don't know. But they've lost too many players. Ryan T going overseas, Daniel Alzani, Nishan Valupale, is he still getting interest? Because his fitness is a question as well.
Mm-hmm.
Losing Bruno, there is lots of chat in Victoria at the moment of plenty of teams giving him offers, both in the NPL and maybe an A-League club or two as well. So I'm almost sure that he's leaving the club. And they just don't have the same qualities they did last year. This is something that we talked about after they lost the grand final to the Mariners, is that it was remarkable how many players from that team they actually managed to retain. And yes. I think just the fact that they've held on for that extra year to have another crack at things meant that the floodgates have kind of opened this season. So they've definitely fallen away in my estimation. Sydney FC, not quite as much. Patrick Lamala, definitely a blow. Obviously, they've had some player sales as well, which has been really good for the club. Hayden Matthews, we know what a blow he was, losing him mid-season last year. But I still think they're in a decent place.
Yeah.
We saw Douglas Costa on Twitter. He's staying around for another year, which I think is great. And they still have the bones of a really good side. So pre-season doesn't mean anything. However, I think you're right.
On the other hand as well, though, we were just talking about how the championship is a really good level. Iran Kunda will be, it'll be great for him to get minutes at that level of competition. It's a great league, etc., etc. And we've now just seen an A-League club beat
yes,
a championship
but
competition.
Also, people keep saying that. We saw the NPL side rip apart Wrexham. But also, how many subs did Wrexham make at the 60th minute?
Yeah.
Like, let's just keep this in perspective a little bit, okay? They scored a good goal that the keeper got fingertips to. They played well, but it's a friendly.
Yeah. I do think, though, that it does show the level that the A-League, kind of can compete at, right, though? That I suppose it's always kind of been underestimated, and there's been speculation about whereabouts in Europe would the A-League slot in, but I think this kind of shows that on its day, it's definitely, capable of, being sort of, I think, mid to lower table championship.
What does Ufuk I think?
Well, he's the other who, of course, made some comments after this game alongside Alex Grant, and his was in the post-match press conference. And he did not seem to want to really comment too much on comparisons to be drawn between England and Australia, at least in terms of football. And the headlining quote from him was that we should love and support our domestic game, which I think that's something we all share, right? We all want, we all want to Australian football to be as good as it can be, but they're quite funny that it was pretty clear they were trying to bait him into getting that juicy highlight comment, and he just wouldn't budge.
Yeah, it did give him the highlight comment, to be fair. Yeah, look, we all love the A-League. I think if you're listening to this podcast, you probably love the A-League, so we don't have to convince you, but it's just little by little, it'll get there. And I've always said this about the APL as well, when people criticising their decision making. what they have to do, the core of their job, is to not disrupt the natural momentum of football too bad. If they can do little initiatives here and there, they get people more interested. That's a bonus. But the natural allure of football, hopefully we build towards a strong second tier and promotion and relegation and a pyramid. Just the natural power of football will get people interested. You only have to look at the rest of the world to see that as a fact. And if we can just stay out of our own way just a little bit, we will get there. I'm a true believer in that. So as long as we can just do the right thing consistently, wait 50 years. I know people don't want to hear that, but we have a really good football culture. Lots of people love the game. More people play the sport than any other team sport in the country. We got the raw stats there. We just got to keep building year by year.